2-hour Raw Wishlist. I'm Will, that's Brandon. We are the Cousins of Destruction Wrestling Podcast. As always, let's cheers. Talk about some wrestling, huh?
Yeah, we've seen 2-hour Raw here, the premiere 2 hours, the return of 2 hours. It was mixed with some reviews, some good reviews, some bad reviews. So what do we kind of want? What are we looking forward here for the next 3 months here before they go back to the 3 hours?
Yeah, the best part about this is it is a time period piece, really. It's just from this October, January. It's going to be a quick little era of Raw. Interesting stuff can happen here. There's a lot of things they can do. SmackDown's been 2 hours forever, and you can easily see over the past few years the difference between Raw and SmackDown because of that extra hour that Raw has. And now that they're going those 2 hours, it's gonna be interesting to see what what Raw looks like. But we got our wish list down. Would you like to go first or me? We don't look at each other's lists.
I'm gonna go first because I'm just gonna take this one. This is an easy one, so I'm just gonna take this one. I want some big main events every single week. So out of the first Raw that we saw Gunther versus Sammy for the World Heavyweight title. I assume we know that Raw is already recorded when we're filming this, but we haven't watched anything yet. So I assume maybe you get the Bianca Jade versus Damage Control maybe. I want some big fight feels like that. We've started to kind of get that in those 3 hours, and I thought that the 3 hours did a really good job of that. I really just want to make sure we cement that in this 2 hour because it really gives you something to end on a high note. Because that Gunther Sammy stuff, like, say whatever you want to say about it. It was a good match. It had the right finish. I was actually really invested in it, and it gave it time. It gave it 20-ish minutes, something like that, where it takes up a chunk of time that I know, hey, you're going to give this the time it deserves. That's really what I want.
Yeah.
To end every show.
I mean, if there's one thing the Triple H era has proved, it's that Triple H has the ball. You can pull that out on any show, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there have been many times we do our predictions for cards and stuff in the future, and we like predict all these matches and title events, and then they just take place on the next week Raw. It's like, right. Oh, thank you. That'll work. I completely with you because not only is that just great to see like title matches and big matches on weekly television, it also like as quick as the 2 hours goes, it makes it like so much worth it, and like you want to get there. Like when they did big matches at the end of Raw, it did it sometimes feel like, damn, I got 2.5 hours till they get there.
Yeah,
2.5 hours. Damn. But now when they do that, and Gunther and Sammy got like 30 minutes,
mm-hmm.
It felt like, oh God, Raw just started. Now we're here. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm completely down with that. To piggyback off that, I did have let Midcard titles shine. So Midcard titles, I want the tag titles, and I want Jey Uso and his IC title to kind of shine during this time.
Yep.
I just think that in terms of Gunther and his world title reign, they're just... A lot of guys are sitting out right now. You got Punk and Drew that are seemingly taking a break. You got Seth, who is seemingly going after the Bronson Reed stuff. There's a lot of good mid-card talent here.
Yeah.
That could really, really do a good, like, this could be a really good era for them and a really good time to really build that part of Raw, just the mid-card, the meat of it. And tag titles, they obviously need some room. They obviously need some... We talk about, we've criticized the tag titles and the way they've been booked since before Mania.
Yeah.
So let's get these mid-card titles going. Let's have them be the big matches. And like, next week we get Bianca and Jade in there. So that's perfect.
Yeah. So basically off of that, I said title matches.
Yeah.
Now every week I'm along the same thing. Now some sort of tag or women's tag or IC or even give a random world heavy defense, something like that. Also within that, I want to see it to where we get some sort of change. I'm over the titles just changing hands at these big PLEs or the Big Four or Mania or whatever you want to say. Just spice it up a little bit. The tag titles is a perfect chance, a perfect opportunity that you could have that match in 2 weeks on Raw. You could have Balor versus JD and Balor and JD versus somebody.
Yep.
And you could do the creeds. I don't care. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but whatever. Just pick a random team. And you could just drop the titles and switch them. And then it's like, okay, now I'm invested. Now I know that there's the possibility for something big to happen again.
Yeah, no, I'm completely down with that. Yeah, I mean, that all flows together, right? Let the mid-card title shine. And back and forth with titles are fun. It's something that we haven't seen in forever, it feels like. And if you're just going to use this 3 months of Raw to really give us big matches like that every single week, man, give us a tug of war with some belts. Let us see who's going to walk away with the belt this week type deal. Obviously, don't overdo it, but especially the tag team titles, man, Judgment Day, they can do that all day long. I don't care.
Yeah, and Raw has based off of or to piggyback off of your, like, mid-card really has a chance to shine. Like, Raw has a really good, heavy mid-card presence. So there's many people that could go ahead and challenge Jay. I know Jay said he's going to be a fighting champion. So why not just actually display that?
Yeah. For my next one, I already alluded to it a little bit, the idea of Punk and Drew resting. And I said, let them rest. It's simple wish list item here. I don't need to see Drew McIntyre or CM Punk until January. Punk came out this week, limped out there, looked for real limping. He's old man. He got beat up. That was a big match. All right. I don't need them showing up during these 2-hour Raws and not fighting, trying to, taking up 20 minutes for promos every single week or every other week, stuff like that. Just let those guys go for a little bit. Let them have their break, their vacation. And then when January 1st comes back around, come on back. Let's get you back, CM Punk.
Yeah. I mean, it's a perfect kind of storm for them to take some time off. Like we had talked about the news when it came out. How do you go from 3 hours to 2 hours? Well, people are going to have to miss time.
Yep.
People aren't going to get as much screen time. So what better way to let those guys rest up? It's a perfect thing. You have a chance to build new stars. So whenever they do come back, you could have somebody big come back, and then you can have Drew come back and say, like, oh, this guy's been on a tear since Drew's been gone. And Drew's like, oh, this is still my ring, or whatever you want to do. Something like that,
Yeah. To piggyback off that idea that you just said of like guys taking breaks and stuff like that, I did put take breaks from storylines when needed. So, something that we used to see back in the day where you might not see a storyline every single week. It was one of those things where, you'd see a big, a chunk of the story, and then the next week, none of it. And then the week after, they pick back up with it. I think this is kind of desperately needed at the moment with Judgment Day. And this week was actually that, right? Like, we didn't see any Judgment Day. We saw a tiny Liv promo, or the Liv segment with the car, and then a tiny Rhea segment. But nothing big there, and I would even separate that from the Judgment Day at the moment. I would say that's more Liv and Rhea. But you didn't see any Damian Priest or Judgment Day or Finn Balor stuff at all this week, and it was like, after Bad Blood, I'm okay with that, man. Let's take a little break from that and kind of get your feet underneath you again. And I just wouldn't mind seeing that with rivalries throughout this 2-hour era.
Yeah.
Just because there's no time to overdo it, and you don't need to. And Raw has been very much, I wouldn't say criticized. We kind of like it, but it's been called the soap opera of WWE, right? You have NXT, you have SmackDown, and then Raw is more of a soap opera. This is a time to kind of take a break from the soap opera era and kind of just focus on little stuff here, little stuff there, matches, stuff like that.
Yeah, and so I have kind of to piggyback off of that. I put short opening segments. I know WWE is famous for starting the night with a promo.
Yep.
I want to see something a little bit different where, like, maybe they started out and they have the match just right off the go. Like, don't get me wrong, the Punk stuff was good. It was needed. That's a send-off. The Rollins stuff was like a welcome back. Hey, here, we're alluding to the next feud. That's fine. But right after, boom, Jey Uso came out.
Yeah.
Why not just have something to where, like, right off the bat, you come in, Joe Tessitore says hello, introduces him, Wade, we're from wherever. Let's get this Intercontinental title match going.
That'd be nuts.
Boom, right off the bat. Like I said, I know it's not WWE's forte. They do like the soap opera stuff, but just something like that to really get the show going. Because that automatically like lifts up my energy, and it's like, okay, cool, I'm excited. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, literally what you just said. I put matches over promos. It just, we don't have the time anymore for the big time promos. And when you do too many promos, which I still think Raw last week did, then you have to end up with stuff like 10-woman tag team matches to try to get everybody on the screen.
Yeah.
I'd much rather instead of doing the in-ring promos, I like the idea of like the 30 or the 60-second, 90-second little promo video packages they've been doing lately, like with the Rhea thing where she's like in some random room. That's way more effective to me at the moment with this time period than getting the full entrance, making the way to the ring, feeling out the crowd, then getting your point across. It's like, we officially don't have that time with this huge Raw roster, right? It works on SmackDown because, admittedly, SmackDown's roster isn't as fully fleshed as Raw's, but Raw has the people. You need to get on with it. So just, This should be a time for matches to kind of be the thing. Let your mid cards go out there. Don't need to do promos. Let them fight. Showcase.
Yeah, we're not saying to like, just to kind of reiterate what you're going off of. We're not saying like, hey, there's not a time and place for these long promos.
Oh, yeah,
or like, hey, people shouldn't have the ability. They should still have the ability to do it. But in a day and age where like people's attention spans are shorter, it makes sense for these 60, 90 seconds. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, we're going from this. We're going to this. We're going to this. Like, that's why like when I talked about the opening segments, like, yeah, don't get me wrong. The opening segment was good after Bad Blood. It was fine. But it was like, okay, we have Punk, and then, okay, now we have Rollins, and then it's like, okay, and then that finally leads into the match. Like, it was like, okay, I don't want these things to drag on. I feel like the 2-hour Raw from the 3-hour Raw, like, it should feel more fast-paced. SmackDown, obviously, with the 2 hours, like, it's been 2 hours forever. It's kind of cut and dry. They've got that good to go for better or for worse. Sometimes there's not a whole lot of good over there. Sometimes there's good, sometimes there's bad. But this should feel like a fast-paced Raw every single time.
Yeah, completely agree.
You want to go with your next one?
Yeah. I this was simple during the 2-hour era. Figure out the women's division. Figure it out. We need it. Last week's Raw, the 2 hours was never more highlighted than it was in the 10-woman tag match. The jumbled mess that it was of just the idea of like, oh, we don't have time. They want to see all these people, so just throw them out the door and have them fight in this match. And it's like, no. That might have worked mid-2000s when the Divas division was a thing and they were starting to get good at wrestling, but it still wasn't on top of our minds. That's changed. Yep. That's changed. The women can go, and you got women on this roster that can go, especially girls like Lyra Valkyria, especially girls like, Io Sky and them, obviously, but even members of the Pure Fusion Collective, they can go when given the right circumstance. And I just think that we need to take the time in these 2 hours with guys taking time off like they are with big time names, like once again, Punk, Drew, stuff like that, where you need to start allocating time to figuring out what the hell you're doing there.
Yeah, I think that's really important, not only because the 10 women tag match was a disaster. It was awful.
Yeah.
Not only that, but like they've got to figure out a way, because like Damage Control right now are challenging for those tag titles, but then like what other tag teams are next in line? There's rumors about women's Midcard down the road, maybe whenever they do unveil those. Well, like right now it's kind of just Liv and Rhea, and I guess Raquel's helping Liv, and then you have whoever's fighting for the tag titles.
Yep.
And whoever has them, and then it's just whatever else this is. Yeah.
A pool.
And so we need to kind of get it firmly established about like, okay, these women are next in line. Take this more serious than this, that sort of thing.
Damn, you mentioned it right there. What a better time to throw in a women's mid-card title. You could take the next October to January and you could do a big tournament. You could really get that thing going. It'd be a phenomenal time to get a women's mid-card title in there.
Yeah, and there's rumors about it obviously for forever.
For years.
I assume maybe like a big event like a Mania they're going to do that, but like let's build this up. Like let's build the women's division up, because it's rough at times.
Yeah.
It's rough with the product they put out there. I should put it that way.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna say not as much picture in picture, like
less commercials,
which is like, I understand they have to get the commercials and I get that.
Yeah.
But admittedly, for me, I would rather them, and it sounds weird, but I would rather them just go to the commercial if that's the case. It sounds weird because, people are probably going to disagree with this, but like for me, I have a very short attention span. So it's very hard for me to focus on the wrestling here when I've got the Wendy's or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean?
Whopper.
It's just really tough for me to focus. So maybe like, obviously they're not going to just take out picture in picture, but just, I don't know, you can even present it better, but it's just really tough for something for me to handle that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Commercials were obviously a big trouble point for the first 2 hour Raw last week. It was all over social media. People being like, well, it was a 2 hour Raw, but it felt like the 3 hour commercials were still in there. And
right.
I will slightly disagree. I agree, like I get your sentiment. Mm-hmm. I get to still see a little bit of wrestling up there in the picture in picture. So I guess I'd rather that, but I'm still with you on like, even when it's picture in picture, mm-hmm. I don't find myself actually paying attention to the wrestling. I really don't.
And that's kind of my main point there is like, if you're going to throw the commercial on there,
just do it.
Yeah. Like there are too many commercials. I agree with whoever had the backlash of last week because it was rough. It was really, really tough. And the picture-in-picture, like, it's just hard for me to focus. I would rather them just... It was cool when it first came out, don't get me wrong. When WWE kind of started doing it, AEW started doing it, it was like, okay, cool, I'll still pay attention to this. But now I'm so used to it that I can't focus.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's not much else to say. I mean, you can go in. I can go into an essay about the product placement and commercials in WWE as a whole, let alone during 2-hour shows, because it does at this point feel like you're getting in what's supposed to be 120 minutes of wrestling. It feels like you're getting right over 70 minutes of actual WWE content
That might
doing
be,
it.
yeah.
Like it really feels like commercials take up the way like 30% of the show, which is like, damn. Like,
yeah, and then they have so many commercials with the product placement anyway. Like the Donnybrook match was a small batch whiskey commercial. So like, or not commercial, but it was like a sponsorship. So it's like,
dude,
the product placement, that sort of stuff.
When you go back and watch Rock and Roman versus Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins at Mania, it's got freaking like insurance logos all over the place. I'm like, that's going to be one of the probably the biggest tag match in the history of tag matches at Mania. Not saying the best, but one of the biggest. And when you go back and watch it, you're going to be like, oh, it's this company the entire time. It's like, oh, it's ugly. I go into that, man.
Side tangent. Right
I could absolutely go.
Maybe that's what I did this for. Was I brought it up because I knew it was going to be a side tangent.
That's how I feel about it. One thing that this is definitely the least likely, but say the show stays the way it is, and they don't make these big changes that we're kind of asking for. With Punk and Drew being out, obviously that's a big chunk of your top guys gone. Definitely in terms of minutes on the show. Not a bad time to bring somebody up from NXT. There's a crap ton of talent down there all the way around, and talk about something that can really inject life into the women's division if needs so, because they have the best women's division in all of professional wrestling, in my opinion. But there's a lot of men and women on NXT absolutely ready for the call up, and you're even getting the people are already like, well, maybe Ethan Page is on his way up because CM Punk's starting to mess with them and stuff like that. I mean, you had Randy Orton down there at NXT this week. You had Jay down there. You had Bianca down there. Like, there's a lot of interaction between NXT and the main roster right now. So wouldn't be a bad time to bring some guys up, even though I'd rather that happen on SmackDown than Raw.
Yeah, SmackDown kind of needs it more than Raw, but like I definitely understand the sentiment because it's a bad time to go from 3 hours to 2 hours, in my opinion, because the roster for Raw is already so heavy, and then the NXT roster is so deep. Like, SmackDown's really the only roster that I find myself like, we need some new life. You know what I mean? So it's definitely a tough thing, and it is only for a couple months, but like I can really feel it. One thing that I put on here was I need them to lay out next week properly. Like, I need it to be like, okay, here's who you're seeing. Here's what you get next week. I know they do a decent job at it, but like I felt bad on this 2-hour Raw. There was a sign in the crowd, but they showed the signs, and these people were like, yeah, we moved our honeymoon to this to come see Rhea Ripley. And then it was like, well, you didn't get Rhea Ripley.
Well, they did because it was back-to-back taping, but that's not happening everywhere. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, well, can we just, and they probably won't, and they probably don't care. But like, for people that want to spend their hard-earned money at this type of stuff, like, okay, next week you guys are getting American Made. Next week you guys are getting this. And they do a decent job at it with some of the matches and stuff. But like, I want to hear like next week you'll hear from these people or something like that, where it's kind of laid out concrete that I know what I'm kind of getting.
I'm with you. I mean, I always like that in wrestling when they just, and Raw's done a good job with it, where they really do a good job at giving you the good idea of what's coming the next week. But I will give the head nod to WWE. Normally, they do a good job with dark matches and stuff. Normally with these short shows, to where after in the dark matches, on SmackDown you'll still have Jey Uso run out there and stuff like that. So hoping that they continue to do that, but and
the unpredictability is fine at some points, but like I kind of want to know like a little bit of the structure to the night. You know what I mean? So we'll see.
I do have one more thing. It's just because of the good old Donnybrook match, I do say this is a good time for some gimmick matches. 2-hour shows, sprinkling in just like every couple weeks some like ridiculous fun gimmicky match, like a dumpster match, like a Donnybrook match. Like, those ended up being the highlights of the night for a lot of people. I would say they were the highlights of the night for the past couple weeks. And like a 2-hour show, that just screams, let's have some fun here. So let's go ahead and do it. And I want to see more gimmicky stuff like that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun. right? I'm not gonna sit here and be like, no, they're doing too much of this stuff. Like WWE is able to have the gimmicky stuff and they pull it off more times than they don't. So they have a really good job at that. Last thing I think I'll probably add for the 2-hour Raw, like make sure that Gunther is on every show or your world champion, whoever that may be at the time. I know there were some like after he won King of the Ring leading up to like challenging Priest and then all that stuff. Like he was away on the tours and all that stuff. I still want it to be like at the end. It doesn't have to be the main event every single time because like I said, I want some title matches and things like that, but have Gunther make sure he's on every show. Make it feel like a big deal. It used to be, back in the day, like you have Stone Cold and Taker versus DX or whatever the case may be. Like they had a big fight feel at the end of the night. And that's who else can you do it with other than your world champ,
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I think that this is a point, whether it's 2 hours or 3 hours or 5 hours long. I just think that you need to make sure that your champions are there and that, especially your main guy, that the World Heavyweight Championship is the belt, the championship of your show. Yep. He is supposed to be the face, at least in terms of like storyline, right? Like he's the champ. He should be the face. We all know that it's probably like Jay and Bianca at this point. Right. But yeah, show up, be there, be a champion.
Yeah, really just have that. Like I said, just bring that sort of importance back, the prestige he always talks about, make me feel that through the screen a little bit.
I agree. But anyway, this 2-hour Raw era, it's going to be short-lived. It's only October through January, but it's, for us, it's nice to get to bed a little bit earlier. You know what I mean? I like it. If it gives us some good 2-hour shows and I get to go to bed afterward, that's pretty nice. Looking forward to it. We'll see how this era goes. But these are our wish list items. Let us know in the comments what you guys want to see out of this 2-hour Raw era. Follow us on all of our socials at COD WrestlePod, COD WrestlePod. Listen to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts at YouTube, Spotify, Apple, etc. And we have a Discord if you want to come talk to us. We have a link tree in our bio. It has all of our socials. Go ahead and give them all a follow and come say hi. But till next time, I'm Will, and that's Brandon. We are the Cousins of Destruction Wrestling Podcast. We will see you next time.